The Labor government has introduced the Conversion Practices Prohibition Legislation Bill, which is a proposed law to ban conversion therapy. Now, the first question that needs to be answered is, what is conversion therapy? The term has been coined by activists, but it's not clearly defined. Now, if it means practices which are coercive, abusive or involuntary, or include things like electric shock therapy or anti-gay boot camps, then we can all agree such things are inhumane and must be condemned. These types of therapy should not be part of any community, let alone a faith-based one. Therapy or counselling should never be forced on anyone. And sadly, in the past, many state institutions have sanctioned inhumane treatments such as electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, being stripped naked and being locked in a small room, massive doses of medication, lobotomies, and screaming patients chained to chairs. Thankfully, these are not part of current practice, and certainly not part of any religious organisation. However, banning conversion therapy has expanded to mean stopping someone who experiences unwanted same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria from getting counselling or support of any sort that they may desire. So the government wants to criminalise the discussion and practice of alternatives to puberty blockers, transgender surgery and confusion, especially for children. And the government also wants to prevent people from getting help to live the lifestyle they choose. Let's have a look at the proposed law. Under the proposed law, parents, yes, parents, could be criminalised and liable to 3 and possibly even 5 years imprisonment simply for affirming that their sons are boys and their daughters are girls. A ban would criminalise loving parents who wish to protect their children from the physical, emotional and psychological harm caused by gender dysphoria. And not only can you be charged for a crime, but complaints can also be made to the Human Rights Commission and the Human Rights Review Tribunal, which will also have a chilling effect. The Ministry of Justice's own analysis of the proposed law says interactions within a family would also be captured if they meet the definition of conversion practices. It would be a criminal offence for parents or other members of a family to attempt to change or suppress the sexual orientation, gender identity or expression of children within the family. And Crown law advice to the government even refers to this chilling effect on expressions of opinion within families and whānau. But if parents aren't concerned about this proposed law, they will be after they hear this. Chris Farfoy, the Minister of Justice, who is responsible for this legislation, was interviewed on News Talk ZB on the day that the legislation was finally released, and he was unable to answer this basic question. Is it okay for a parent to say no to hormone blockers for a 12-year-old who wants to change their gender? Have a listen to his response, and his backpedaling, and his confusion.
Parents, for example, saying to a child who may be prepubescent saying, I want to go on hormone blockers, saying, no, you can't. That's cool with you?
No, it's not. So let me go back to what you first asked about ministers. They are supporting people day in, day out.
Yeah.
Parents are supporting their children who do have gender issues. Regardless of whether it's a priest, a parent or the rugby coach down the road, the fundamental part of this bill is that you can't intend to change someone else's sexual orientation.
Yeah, but hold on. If it's a parent saying to a 12-year-old, no, you can't go on the hormone blockers because you're 12, you're not okay with that?
So what it's about is there are 2 protections here, Heather.
I'm not asking you that. I'm just saying as a parent or a guardian, right, you're in charge of a 12-year-old who cannot make proper decisions because they're not an adult. Are you you just answered before when I asked you if it was okay for the parent to say no to the hormone blockers, you said no.
Well,
is that your position on this?
And then I stopped to make sure that we were on the same wavelength.
Is that still your position on this?
No, so as I say,
I'm asking this question, right? Answer this yes or no. If a parent says to a 12-year-old, you are not taking hormone blockers to change your gender because you are too young, is that right or wrong under this legislation?
So and I'll talk about the principle, okay?
Why can you not answer this question? You're introducing
Heather,
legislation.
And I'm about to answer it. Just
God's sake, Minister, it's a 12-year-old. How can you say that you're going to throw a parent in jail because they stopped their child changing their gender?
Okay, but we're not going to do that. Okay, there is a long line before you get to a conversion practice and a criminal offence.
So apparently they're going to pass a law, but they don't want to criminalise anyone with it. And he tries to suggest that the proposed law with significant criminal sanctions isn't about criminalising anyone, but then talks about the process which results in parents ending up in court. And conveniently, he also doesn't mention the role of the Human Rights Commission, which should freak out parents just as much. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was then asked to clarify the issue for families. Would a parent be breaking the law if they stop their child from taking hormone blockers? Simple question, simple answer, yes or no. See if you can hear a clear yes or no.
A question that keeps coming up is whether a parent counsels or blocks their child from receiving puberty blockers, if they can be criminalised. Can you just set the record straight?
Yeah, I am hugely disappointed that that would be used as a rationale not to support this bill.
So just a clarification, Prime Minister, is that situation punishable under the law?
Well, look, from the description of our law, you have to demonstrate that there's been a willful desire to suppress someone's identity, that it's affecting someone who is both underage and seriously harming them, and before a prosecution could be laid, that it would have to be approved by the Attorney General. That seems to me to be a very unlikely scenario.
An unlikely scenario? Completely wrong. There's a growing phenomenon of children suddenly identifying as transgender after exposure to the concept through peers and social media. And to make matters worse, teachers are encouraged by the Ministry of Education to keep a child's gender identity secret from their parents by allowing the child to adopt a new persona at school, including the use of preferred pronouns, without having to inform the parents. Yes, disgraceful. It's certainly not an unlikely scenario. But a mum who encourages and helps her 12-year-old daughter to accept the body she was born with, rather than being placed on dangerous puberty blockers and wearing chest binders, could be committing a criminal offence under this proposed law. A parent who promotes biological sex could be criminalised. Hey, but an activist who indoctrinates young children with the concept of gender fluidity and third gender will be celebrated. This is not loving or compassionate towards children. Numerous reviews show the majority of children who are confused about their gender also suffer from diagnosed mental disorders, such as depression and anxiety. Australian paediatrician and expert on this issue, Dr. John Whitehall, makes a very good point. He says, isn't the current transitioning of a child to an alternate gender just another form of conversion therapy, using the same old and abhorrent means of psychological pressure, hormones, and surgery? It's a very good question. Interestingly, one of the key activists promoting this bill recently tweeted this: if a medical professional and a trans kid agree that blockers is a suitable medication to prescribe, a transphobic parent should not get in the way of that. Well, parents should be outraged by that type of attitude. Now, under the proposed ban, it would be illegal for a counsellor, spiritual leader, pastor, youth worker, teacher, or other professional to counsel a child or adult with gender dysphoria in a way that affirms biology. They could be liable up to 5 years imprisonment. If a young person, for example, wanted to align their sexuality with the teachings and values of their particular faith, be it Muslim, Christian, Jewish or Sikh, and sought help to do so from a minister or faith leader, the proposed law change would make it virtually impossible to access the support they wanted. And if they were able to find someone prepared to provide counselling of that kind, they could well cause that person to become implicated in a criminal offence. Prayer as part of counselling or within the setting of a religious meeting, for example, would also fall inside the concept of conversion therapy. The Ministry of Justice admits this. Conversion practices that take the form of prayer and counselling that are directed towards an individual would be captured. And the prohibition would not be effective if certain methods such as prayer were excluded. So if a church minister, imam or youth leader were to pray, for example, for a teenager or an adult to be freed from unwanted sexual thoughts or identity issues, this could be a criminal offence. It may therefore become dangerous for someone to express confusion over their sexuality or gender. No one would be able to legally protect them from the gender transitioning protocols that are backed by the state. And this will lock young people into transgenderism. Islamic and Christian schools could be breaking the law for teaching their students that God made us male and female. Church leaders, youth workers and imams could become criminals for reading and explaining the Quran or the Bible. That is, for doing their job, if the student believes their identity is being changed or suppressed as a result, and that they have experienced harm, which is not clearly defined in the proposed legislation. But all New Zealanders have a right to freedom of religion, and the teaching and explaining of a religion is a legitimate activity for places of worship, faith-based schools and for other religious groups. The politicians and the media will try and argue that there is protection for religious teaching, but what this exactly means is not given in the legislation. And of course it depends on how the individual reacts to that explaining and that teaching. Ultimately, it will have a massive chilling effect, as Crown law refers to, because generally religious groups do not want to intentionally break the law. Incredibly, the bill says that consent is irrelevant. Your consent to determine the lifestyle you personally desire is irrelevant. Yep, apparently the mantra, my body, my choice, doesn't apply here. But the right of self-determination and being who you want to be is a founding principle of the mental health profession. And for children, the wider whānau and family is part of this important value and support base. Yet under this proposed bill, you are banned from doing that, even if you consented to it and requested it. Those who dare to seek inner freedom and healing from unwanted behavioural or thought patterns will have nowhere to turn as a result of this proposed ban. The law would oppress and violate the right to seek whatever lifestyle you desire. People like Leah.
I decided to seek help not only to deal with my mental health issues, but also receive support to leave the lesbian life. So I sought counsel from friends and psychologists, ministries, support networks, and also people who had walked very similar journeys to me. And none of these supports were ever harmful or coercive or ineffective. In fact, all these avenues were very effective, supportive, and completely driven by my desire to actively be involved in such counsel.
And you can watch her full testimony and watch and read many others on our website, freetolive.nz. When introducing this proposed ban, Minister of Justice Chris Farfoy also said, conversion practices are based on the false belief that any person's sexual orientation, gender identity or gender expression is broken and in need of fixing. Yet, when it comes to gender dysphoria, the claim is that there is something fundamentally wrong that needs fixing. They were born in the wrong body. And the other disturbing contradiction is that convincing people that they are a different gender to their biological sex is not considered conversion therapy, nor is it considered conversion therapy to encourage a person to explore and develop same-sex attraction. But if a same-sex attracted individual wishes to explore and strengthen a heterosexual attraction or lifestyle, or a person wishes to align with their biological sex, it could be illegal. You can be who you want to be, but only if they agree with your choice. But listen to ex-transgender Walt Heyer, who knew exactly what he needed and wanted.
I do know that good, sound talk psychotherapy that deals with comorbid disorders, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, will allow you to desist from undergoing unnecessary hormone therapy and a totally unnecessary surgical change. That I do know. So you can call it anything you want, but they use the boogeyman conversion therapy term to identify anything that helps people desist from transgender life.
Now here's the interesting thing about this proposed ban. In 2019, the Justice Select Committee, consisting of MPs from Labour and National, considered 2 petitions wanting to ban conversion therapy. And in their report, they declined to support such a ban, stating, "New Zealanders also have the right to freedom of religion. This protects those who offer and seek out conversion therapy because of their religious views." In 2018, the Ministry of Health advice to the Associate Minister of Health said, "Due to the current protections that are in place and the need to balance the rights of people with preventing harm, it is not recommended that a legislative ban on conversion therapy would be the most effective way to reduce the harm it causes." And just how prevalent is this so-called conversion therapy? The Human Rights Commission, in response to an Official Information Act request from us, has admitted that there has only been 1 informal complaint and no formal complaints in the past 10 years in relation to conversion therapy. The Office of the Health and Disability Commissioner, in response to a similar inquiry from us, was also unable to provide any specific numbers. So we did an informal search of 1,400 decisions dating back to 1997, and we could find no evidence of complaints around conversion therapy. Even some of the politicians who have supported the proposed ban have admitted they're also not aware of any cases of involuntary conversion therapy in their communities. So what did the general public really think? Well, we commissioned an independent nationwide poll recently, and it actually found that there is widespread opposition to the legal effects of a conversion therapy ban. In a poll of 1,000 New Zealanders surveyed just before Christmas by Courier Market Research, respondents were asked, if a person is unsure about their sexual orientation or gender identity, should they be able to seek counselling support to determine their own direction in how they identify? A massive 81% of respondents said they believed a person should be able to seek counselling support to determine their own direction. Only 12% were opposed. When asked if a child is confused about their gender, should it be a crime for a parent to affirm to their daughter that she's a girl or to their son that he's a boy? Only 7% of respondents think it should be treated as a crime. And again, an overwhelming 81% were opposed. Respondents were also asked, should it be a crime for a faith leader to teach a biblical or Quran view of sexuality and of gender being determined at birth? Just 16% think it should be a crime. 62% said it shouldn't be a crime. 22% were either unsure or refused to say. Here's the bottom line. All New Zealanders should be protected from coercive, abusive or involuntary psychological or spiritual practices. No disagreement there. However, participation in psychological assessments, counselling sessions, prayer meetings and other therapeutic practices is almost always an expression of voluntary behaviour and personal freedom. To penalise people on the basis of their beliefs or personal lifestyle choices lacks fairness and is a dangerous discrimination. And to criminalise parents who genuinely care for and love their children should certainly not be a crime warranting up to 5 years in jail. So what can you do? Make a submission. The bill has passed its first reading and the government is now asking for public submissions on the bill. It's vital that leaders and families speak up. Go to freetolive.nz and read more background information. Watch Leah's testimony and James' testimony. Read all the other testimonies of lives changed for good. Not good as defined by the politicians or activists or the media, but as defined by the people themselves. And then speak up. Make that submission. Get onto this as soon as possible. If applicable, share your own story. This bill is another form of hate speech law. It's criminalising what the state believes is unacceptable. And it's another form of nanny state, telling good parents how to raise their children. It's time to speak up. Go to freetolive.nz.